Your hand is cramping so violently that you can barely hold the quill. Your eyes burn from squinting at parchment by candlelight for 14 hours straight. One drop of sweat, one moment of inattention, one tiny mistake, and 6 months of work disappears forever, along with materials worth more than a peasant's annual income. Welcome to the scriptorium of Canterbury Cathedral. 1347. You're not just copying words. You're preserving civilization itself, one agonizing letter at a time. And if you think modern deadlines are stressful, wait until you discover what happens when you make an error in the King's personal Bible. The bells of Canterbury Cathedral ring out across the ancient stones as dawn breaks over medieval England. You've been awake since before sunrise, as you have every day for the past 3 years since entering the monastery as a novice scribe. Your fingers are already stiff from the cold, and you haven't even picked up your quill yet. The year is 1347, and you're about to begin another day in one of the most demanding, precise, and surprisingly dangerous professions of the medieval world. As a scribe, you're part of an elite group responsible for creating, copying, and preserving the written word at a time when literacy is rare and books are more valuable than gold. Brother Augustine, the master scribe who oversees the Canterbury scriptorium, approaches your wooden desk with the measured pace of someone who's spent 40 years perfecting the art of manuscript creation. His eyes, weakened by decades of close work by inadequate lighting, peer at you through the half-darkness of the early morning. Brother Thomas, he says, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through years of flawless craftsmanship. Today you begin work on the Psalter, commissioned by His Majesty King Edward III. The materials alone are worth more than most men see in a lifetime. The deadline is Michaelmas 6 months hence. There is no margin for error. Your stomach tightens as you realize the magnitude of what's being asked. A royal commission represents the highest honor a scribe can receive, but also the greatest pressure. Kings don't accept excuses, delays, or imperfections. The fate of the entire monastery's relationship with the crown rests in your ink-stained fingers. The parchment you'll be working with is made from the finest calfskin, prepared through a process that takes months and costs a fortune. Each sheet represents the death of a young calf, the skilled work of multiple craftsmen, and enough money to feed a peasant family for weeks. Every letter you write must be perfect, because there's no going back. The illuminations will be added by Brother Francis once you've completed the text. Brother Augustine continues, the gold leaf alone costs more than a knight's horse. His Majesty has specifically requested that the work be completed in the finest Gothic script, with no abbreviations or shortcuts. Every word must be written in full, every letter formed with absolute precision. As he speaks, you're acutely aware of the physical toll that awaits you. Your back already aches from the hunched position you'll maintain for the next 14 hours. Your right hand bears the permanent calluses and ink stains that mark you as a professional scribe. Your eyes, like those of every scribe you know, have begun to weaken from the constant strain of reading and writing by inadequate light. The scriptorium itself is a testament to the importance of written work in medieval society. High windows provide what natural light is available, but for most of the year, scribes work by the flickering illumination of candles and oil lamps. The room is kept deliberately cold to prevent the precious inks from spoiling and to keep scribes alert during long hours of work. Shelves line the walls, filled with completed manuscripts that represent decades of collective labor. Bibles, prayer books, chronicles, philosophical treatises, and legal documents, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship that will outlive its creator by centuries. Some of these books have already survived longer than the kingdoms that commissioned them. Your workspace consists of a slanted wooden desk designed to hold parchment at the optimal angle for writing. To your right sits an array of quills in various stages of preparation, some freshly cut, others worn down from use but still functional. For different types of lettering, your ink pot contains a mixture of oak gall, iron, and wine that creates the deep black color that will remain legible for centuries. But it's not just the physical demands that make scribing so challenging. As you prepare to begin work on the Royal Psalter, you're acutely aware that you're about to spend the next 6 months copying one of the most important religious texts in Christianity. Every word has theological significance. Every verse has been scrutinized by centuries of scholars. A single miscopied phrase could alter the meaning of sacred scripture. Remember, Brother Augustine says, placing a weathered hand on your shoulder, you are not merely copying words. You are preserving the Word of God for future generations. Your work will outlive kingdoms, survive wars, and guide souls to salvation long after we're all dust. The responsibility is sacred, but so is the honor. As he walks away to check on the other scribes beginning their daily work, you're left alone. With the blank parchment and the crushing weight of expectation, the first letter you write will begin a journey that will test your skill, your endurance, your faith, and your sanity. Welcome to the life of a medieval scribe. Before you can begin the actual work of copying the Psalter, you must prepare your tools with the meticulous care that separates professional scribes from amateur copyists. Every implement in your arsenal has been carefully selected and maintained, because the quality of your writing depends entirely on the quality of your preparation. Your quills come from the wing feathers of geese, carefully selected for their size, flexibility, and durability. But not just any goose feather will do. The best quills come from birds killed in late autumn when their feathers are at their strongest. The feathers must be taken from the left wing of the bird, because the natural curve of left wing feathers fits better in a right-handed scribe's grip. Preparing a quill is an art form in itself. First, you strip away the barbs to create a smooth shaft that won't interfere with your grip. Then comes the delicate process of cutting the nib, the writing tip that will determine the character of every letter you write. Too wide, and your letters will be clumsy and imprecise. Too narrow, and the quill will catch on the parchment, creating blots and tears that could ruin hours of work. Brother Marcus, the monastery's quillmaster, demonstrated the proper technique during your first year of training. Watch carefully, he said, taking a prepared feather in his left hand and a sharp knife in his right. The first cut must be at precisely the right angle to create a point. That will hold ink without being too sharp. The second cut creates the slit that allows ink to flow smoothly from the shaft to the parchment. The knife work required for quill preparation is so precise that many scribes develop cuts and scars on their hands from years of daily tool maintenance. Your own fingers bear testimony to the learning process. Thin white lines marking the times when concentration slipped and the blade found flesh instead of feather. Your ink is equally crucial to the success of your work. The monastery's ink is made according to a recipe that's been refined over generations of scribes. Oak galls, the bulbous growths that form on oak trees when wasps lay their eggs, are ground into powder and mixed with iron sulfate and a binding agent made from wine or vinegar. The result is a deep black ink that will penetrate the parchment and remain legible for centuries. But mixing ink is more art than science. Too much iron, and the mixture becomes corrosive, eventually eating through the parchment it's meant to preserve. Too little, and the text fades within decades. The exact proportions must be adjusted based on the humidity, temperature, and even the specific batch of oak galls being used. The parchment itself represents the most expensive component of any manuscript project. Made from the skins of calves, sheep, or goats, good parchment requires months of preparation. The skins must be soaked in lime water to remove hair and flesh, then scraped clean, stretched on frames, and dried under tension. The surface is then rubbed with pumice to create the smooth, even texture that allows for precise writing. For a royal commission like the Psalter you're about to begin, only the finest vellum will do. This ultra-high quality parchment comes from calfskin and costs more per sheet than most people earn in a month. Each piece must be inspected for flaws, holes, thin spots, or rough textures that could interfere with writing. A single defective sheet discovered after hours of work has been completed means starting over from the beginning. Your workspace is arranged with obsessive precision. The parchment lies flat on your slanted desk, held in place by weighted cords that prevent it from shifting as you work. Your inkpot sits within easy reach of your right hand, positioned so that you can dip your quill without taking your eyes off the text you're copying. Multiple backup quills lie ready for use, because a broken or dulled nib in the middle of a complex passage can ruin the flow and consistency of your script. Perhaps most importantly, you have your exemplar, the master copy from which you'll be working. For the Royal Psalter, this is a beautifully illuminated manuscript that has been checked and rechecked for accuracy by multiple scholars. Every word, every punctuation mark, every abbreviation has been verified against the original Latin texts and approved by the monastery's most learned theologians. The exemplar sits on a stand to your left, positioned so that you can read from it while writing without having to constantly turn your head. This reduces neck strain during long working sessions. But it also requires you to develop the ability to hold multiple lines of text in your memory while transferring them to your own manuscript. As you arrange your tools and prepare to begin work, you're acutely aware that you're about to embark on a process that will consume the next 6 months of your life. Every day will begin before dawn and end long after sunset. Your meals will be eaten quickly at your desk to maintain productivity. Your sleep will be haunted by dreams of misformed letters and ink blots. Your social life will virtually disappear as you become consumed by the demands of precision copying. But you're also aware that you're about to participate in one of the most important activities of medieval civilization. The manuscript you create will preserve sacred knowledge for future generations. It will serve as a tool for worship, study, and spiritual guidance. It will represent the highest achievements of medieval art and craftsmanship. And if you do your job perfectly, it will survive long after the kingdom that commissioned it has fallen to dust. Your typical day as a medieval scribe begins at 4:30 a.m. when the monastery bells ring for vigils, the first of the 8 daily prayer services that structure monastic life. Unlike the other monks who can stumble through early morning prayers in a half-awake state, you must be fully alert because your workday begins immediately after the service ends. By 5:15 a.m., you're seated at your desk in the scriptorium, taking advantage of the precious hour of dawnlight that provides the best illumination for detailed work. Your first task is always the same: examining yesterday's work for errors that might have escaped notice in the fading light of evening. Finding a mistake at this stage is devastating but manageable. Finding it after you've written several more pages means scraping away hours of work and starting over. The physical demands of scribing become apparent within the first hour of work. Your body is locked into a position that places tremendous strain on your neck, shoulders, and back. Your right arm must remain steady enough to form precise letters while maintaining enough flexibility to move smoothly across the page. Your left hand grips the exemplar and occasionally steadies the parchment, developing its own set of cramps and strains. But it's your eyes that bear the greatest burden. Medieval lighting, even at its best, requires enormous effort to maintain focus on fine details. By the time you're an hour into your work, your eyes are already watering from the strain. By midday, you're squinting constantly. By evening, words blur together, and you're working as much by muscle memory as by vision. The actual process of copying requires intense concentration that can't be maintained indefinitely. You read a phrase from the exemplar, memorize it, then transfer it to your parchment while maintaining perfect letter forms and consistent spacing. A single moment of inattention can result in skipped words, duplicated phrases, or letters that don't match the required script style. Brother Augustine has drilled into every scribe the importance of consistency. Your letters must be so uniform. He often says that someone examining the finished manuscript cannot tell where you stopped work one day and resumed the next. Every I must be identical to every other. Every line must be perfectly straight and evenly spaced. The reader should see only the text, never the hand that wrote it. Achieving this level of consistency requires developing muscle memory. For every letter and combining form, you practice letter forms during whatever spare time you have, writing rows of identical letters on practice parchment until your hand can form them perfectly without conscious thought. Even so, maintaining consistency across hundreds of pages is exhausting work that pushes the limits of human precision. The monastery's daily schedule provides occasional breaks, but they're hardly restful. At 6 a.m., you stop work for lauds, then return to your desk. At 9 a.m., terce provides another brief interruption. The pattern continues throughout the day. Prime, sext, none, vespers, and finally compline at 7 p.m. But between these services, you're expected to maintain focus and productivity for hours at a stretch. Meals are eaten quickly at your desk to maintain momentum. Breakfast consists of bread and weak ale. Dinner brings a bowl of pottage, a thick porridge made from whatever vegetables and grains are available. Supper, if you're lucky enough to finish work before dark, might include a small portion of meat or fish. All meals must be consumed without dripping onto your work, which means developing the ability to eat while keeping your eyes on the manuscript. The physical toll of long scribing sessions becomes increasingly apparent as the day progresses. Your right hand develops a claw-like grip that's difficult to relax. Your shoulders hunch forward in a position that becomes painful to straighten. Your eyes burn continuously, and you find yourself blinking frequently to clear your vision. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of daily scribing is the mental fatigue that comes from maintaining perfect concentration for hours on end. A moment's distraction can result in copying the same line twice, skipping words, or worst of all, making creative improvements to the text that constitute heretical alterations to sacred scripture. Brother Michael learned this lesson the hard way during his second year as a scribe. While copying a gospel passage, his attention wandered, and he accidentally wrote, "Jesus wept," instead of "Jesus slept," in a passage about Christ's rest after teaching. The error wasn't discovered until the manuscript was nearly complete, requiring weeks of work to be scraped away and redone. Brother Michael was assigned a stable duty for a month as penance for his carelessness. The afternoon hours bring their own challenges. As natural light fades, scribes must rely increasingly on candlelight and oil lamps. The flickering illumination makes it difficult to maintain consistent letter forms and creates eye strain that compounds the fatigue accumulated throughout the day. Mistakes become more frequent as visibility decreases and concentration wavers. By 6 p.m., most scribes are working in nearly complete darkness. Guided more by feel and experience than by sight, the scratch of quills on parchment fills the scriptorium, punctuated by occasional muttered prayers and the soft sounds of pages turning. The smell of hot wax and lamp oil mingles with the organic scents of parchment and ink. The workday officially ends with compline at 7 p.m. But dedicated scribes often continue working by lamplight until their vision fails completely. The pressure to meet deadlines, especially on royal commissions, means that every available hour must be used productively. Sleep becomes a luxury. That's sacrificed to the demands of precision and punctuality. As you finally set down your quill and examine the day's progress, you're acutely aware of how little you've accomplished relative to the enormous task ahead. On a good day, you might complete 2 or 3 pages of text, with hundreds of pages required for the complete psalter. The mathematics are daunting. Every day of lost productivity means the deadline becomes less achievable. But you're also aware that the pages you've completed represent something precious and enduring. The words you've carefully transcribed will survive long after you're gone, carrying sacred knowledge and divine wisdom to readers you'll never meet. In a world where most people can't read or write, you're serving as a crucial link between the wisdom of the past and the needs of the future. Sleep, when it finally comes, brings a little rest. Your dreams are filled with letters, words, and phrases from the day's work. Your hand continues to move in writing motions, and you often wake with cramped fingers that must be massaged back to functionality. The mental strain of maintaining perfect accuracy doesn't disappear just because you've closed your eyes. Tomorrow will bring another 14 hours of the same demanding work, and the day after that, and the day after that, until the royal psalter is complete, or your body gives out under the strain. This is the reality of medieval scribing, not the romantic image of peaceful monks quietly copying manuscripts, but a grueling endurance test that pushes human limits of precision, concentration, and physical stamina. Within the scriptorium of Canterbury Cathedral, a complex social hierarchy governs every aspect of daily life, from who sits where to who gets assigned the most prestigious projects. As a junior scribe working on your first royal commission, you occupy a precarious position that requires navigating both the formal monastic hierarchy and the informal power structures that develop among craftsmen who work closely together. Brother Augustine, as master scribe, wields absolute authority over all manuscript production. His word is law when it comes to assignments, deadlines, and quality standards. Having spent 40 years perfecting his craft, he's earned the right to make decisions that affect the careers and reputations of every scribe under his supervision. His approval can elevate a junior scribe to more prestigious projects. His disapproval can result in assignment to mundane copying tasks that offer no opportunity for advancement. Beneath Brother Augustine are the senior scribes, monks who have completed at least 10 years of manuscript work and proven their ability to handle complex projects without supervision. These men are assigned the most important commissions: papal documents, royal charters, and deluxe manuscripts for wealthy patrons. They also serve as teachers for junior scribes, passing on techniques and knowledge that have been refined over generations. Brother Francis, who will be adding illuminations to your psalter, represents the highest level of artistic achievement within the monastery. As the master illuminator, he commands even greater respect than senior scribes, because his work requires not only technical precision, but creative artistry. The golden borders, miniature paintings, and decorative initials that transform a simple text into a work of art depend entirely on his skill and vision. You, as a junior scribe with only 3 years of experience, occupy the bottom rung of the professional hierarchy. Your assignments are subject to approval by senior scribes. Your work is subject to constant review, and your mistakes reflect on the entire scriptorium. The Royal Psalter Commission represents an enormous opportunity for advancement, but also enormous pressure to prove yourself worthy of future prestigious assignments. Below the monks in the hierarchy are the lay scribes, professional copyists who work for wages rather than as part of monastic vows. These men often possess superior technical skills, but lack the theological education that's required for copying religious texts. They're typically assigned to legal documents, commercial correspondence, and secular literature, work that's financially important but lacks the spiritual significance of sacred manuscripts. The apprentices occupy the lowest position in the scriptorium, spending their days preparing materials, maintaining tools, and learning basic letter forms under the supervision of junior scribes. Their work consists mainly of copying practice, texts in simple documents that don't require advanced skills. Many apprentices spend years in this position before being judged worthy of independent copying assignments. But the formal hierarchy tells only part of the story. Informal power structures based on personal relationships, specialized knowledge, and political connections often matter more than official positions. Brother Aldrich, technically a junior scribe like yourself, wields disproportionate influence because his wealthy family has donated extensively to the monastery and maintains close ties to the royal court. His mistakes are overlooked, his suggestions are taken seriously, and his assignments always seem to be the most prestigious and least demanding. Brother Simon, despite 15 years of experience, remains stuck copying routine documents because he once made the mistake of correcting a theological error in a text that had been approved by the abbot. While his correction was accurate, questioning established authority was seen as inappropriate pride. His technical skills are respected, but he's never again been trusted with important commissions. The most dangerous position in the hierarchy belongs to those scribes who possess knowledge that makes them simultaneously valuable and threatening. Brother Thomas Bradwardine, before his elevation to Archbishop of Canterbury, served as a scribe specializing in mathematical and scientific texts. His understanding of advanced mathematics and natural philosophy made him invaluable for copying complex technical works, but also marked him as potentially dangerous in an institution that valued orthodoxy above innovation. Your position on the Royal Psalter project places you at the intersection of multiple hierarchies and competing interests. Success could elevate you to senior scribe status years ahead of the normal timeline. Failure could end your career before it really begins. The weight of expectation from every level of the hierarchy creates pressure that goes far beyond the technical demands of accurate copying. Brother Augustine makes this clear during one of his regular inspections of your work. This commission reflects on every member of our scriptorium. He reminds you as he examines your morning's output. His Majesty judges the quality of Canterbury's scholarship based on the manuscripts we produce. The Archbishop's reputation depends on our craftsmanship. The monastery's future patronage hangs in the balance. You are not simply copying a psalter. You are representing centuries of tradition and excellence. The political implications of your work extend beyond the monastery walls. King Edward III has specifically requested this psalter as part of his efforts to establish English cultural independence from French influence. The manuscript will serve as both a devotional tool and a statement of English artistic achievement. Any errors or shortcomings will be seen as evidence of English cultural inferiority at a time when the kingdom is asserting its independence through military and diplomatic means. The pressure becomes even more intense when you learn that copies of your finished psalter will be sent to other European courts as diplomatic gifts. French, German, and Italian scholars will examine every aspect of your craftsmanship, looking for evidence of English technical competence or lack thereof. Your letter forms, spacing, and accuracy will be scrutinized by experts who are eager to find flaws that confirm their prejudices about English cultural backwardness. Within the scriptorium itself, your colleagues watch your progress with a mixture of support and envy. Success on a royal commission can lead to preferential treatment for future assignments, better workspace allocation, and informal privileges that make the demanding life of a scribe slightly more bearable. But it also creates resentment among those who believe they deserve similar opportunities. Brother Philip, who has 2 more years of experience than you, makes no secret of his belief that he should have been assigned the Psalter Commission. His comments about your work are always technically accurate, but consistently undermining. Interesting choice of letter spacing, he might say while examining your work. Very ambitious for someone with your level of experience. The hierarchy also determines access to the best materials and tools. Senior scribes get first choice of newly prepared parchment, the finest quills, and the most reliable ink batches. Junior scribes must make do with whatever remains, often working with materials that are perfectly adequate, but lack the exceptional quality that makes precision work easier. Your success or failure on the Royal Psalter will determine your position in this hierarchy for years to come. Excellence will open doors to future prestigious commissions and eventual promotion to senior. Scribe status. Mediocrity will condemn you to routine copying assignments that offer little opportunity for advancement or recognition. Failure will end your career as a professional scribe and possibly result in exile from the monastery as you work through the demanding daily routine of copying sacred text. You're constantly aware that you're not just forming letters on parchment. You're navigating a complex social and political environment where every stroke of your quill is subject to judgment by multiple audiences with different standards and competing interests. The technical challenges of accurate copying are difficult enough. The social and political pressures make the work exponentially more stressful. 3 months into your work on the Royal Psalter, the cumulative physical damage from long hours of precision copying has begun to manifest in ways that would be familiar to any modern office worker suffering from repetitive stress injuries. But in medieval times, these occupational hazards are simply accepted as inevitable consequences of scholarly work, with no understanding of ergonomics or preventive medicine to minimize the damage. Your right hand has developed what medieval physicians call scribe's cramp, a condition that affects nearly every professional copyist. The constant gripping of quills in the same position has created permanent indentations in your fingers where the shaft rests. The muscles in your hand and forearm ache constantly, and you've begun to experience involuntary spasms that can strike without warning, causing your hand to jerk and potentially ruin hours of careful work. Brother Marcus, who has been copying manuscripts for 20 years, shows you his own hands as a warning of what lies ahead. His fingers are permanently curved in a writing position that he can no longer straighten completely. Dark stains from decades of ink handling have penetrated so deeply into his skin that no amount of washing can remove them. His right thumb and forefinger bear calluses so thick they resemble leather. The body adapts. He tells you with a rueful smile, but not always in ways that serve us well in other activities. I can write for 12 hours without significant discomfort, but I can barely hold the spoon steady enough to eat soup. Your posture has also begun to change in response to the demands of close work. The hunched position required for detailed copying has started to round your shoulders and curve your spine in ways that create constant tension in your neck and upper back. The medieval writing desk, designed to hold parchment at the optimal angle for ink flow, requires you to crane your neck forward in a position that places enormous strain on the cervical vertebrae. Sleep becomes increasingly difficult as your body struggles to relax muscles that have been held in tension for 14 hours at a stretch. You often wake with headaches that stem from neck tension and eye strain. Your shoulders ache constantly, and you've developed a habit of rolling them periodically throughout the day in an attempt to relieve the accumulated stress. But it's the damage to your eyes that represents the most serious long-term consequence of scribal work. Medieval lighting, even at its best, requires enormous effort to maintain focus on fine details. The flickering illumination from candles and oil lamps creates constant strain as your pupils continuously adjust to changing light levels. The need to focus on tiny letters and punctuation marks for hours at a stretch has begun to affect your distance vision. Brother Augustine, despite his 40 years of experience and unquestioned expertise, has begun to struggle with what medieval physicians call book sickness, the progressive deterioration of vision that affects nearly all career scribes. He's taken to holding manuscripts at arm's length to read them clearly, and his own copying has become noticeably less precise as he struggles to see fine details. The price of preserving knowledge, he observes with characteristic stoicism, is often the gradual loss of one's ability to see it clearly. We give our sight so that future generations might have something worth seeing. The medieval understanding of vision problems is limited and largely ineffective. Treatments range from the useless washing eyes with holy water, or wearing amulets to the actively harmful, applying caustic substances to the eyelids, or bleeding patients to balance. Their humors. The idea that vision problems might be corrected with specially ground lenses won't become practical for another century. Your diet, like that of all monastery residents, lacks many of the nutrients that might help maintain eye health. Fresh fruits and vegetables are rare, especially during winter months. The monastic emphasis on fasting and simple foods means that your body often lacks the resources needed to repair the daily damage caused by intensive visual work. The respiratory effects of long hours in poorly ventilated spaces filled with smoke from lamps and candles add another layer of physical distress. The scriptorium's air is often thick with certain fumes that irritate your throat and lungs. Many scribes develop chronic coughs that worsen over years of exposure to indoor air. Pollution. The need to work by artificial light means that respiratory damage is unavoidable for anyone serious about scholarly careers. Your joints have also begun to show the effects of prolonged immobility. Sitting in the same position for hours at a stretch has started to create stiffness in your hips and knees. That's most noticeable when you finally stand up after long working sessions. The medieval understanding of joint health is minimal, and the idea that regular movement and stretching might prevent problems hasn't been developed. The psychological stress of maintaining perfect accuracy under intense deadline pressure compounds the physical damage by creating muscle tension that never fully releases. Your jaw aches from unconscious clenching. Your shoulders remain elevated even during sleep. Your digestive system suffers from the chronic stress of knowing that a single mistake could ruin months of work and destroy your career prospects. Medieval medicine offers little help for any of these conditions. Physicians trained in classical texts understand the body as a system of humors that must be kept in balance through diet, bloodletting, and herbal remedies. The idea that repetitive motions might cause specific injuries is unknown, and the concept of ergonomic workspace design won't be developed for centuries. Brother Infirmarius, the monastery's medical specialist, treats scribal complaints with the same remedies he uses for any other condition involving pain and inflammation. Willow bark tea for headaches, poultices of herbs for joint pain, bloodletting to reduce excess heat in the body. None of these treatments address the underlying causes of occupational injuries, and some may actually make the problems worse. The long-term career prospects for scribes include the virtual certainty of progressive disability that will eventually end their ability to work. Most career copyists are forced into retirement by their 50s, when hand tremors, vision problems, and joint stiffness make precision work impossible. The lucky ones transition to teaching or administrative roles. The unlucky ones face a future of dependence on monastery charity. Yet despite the obvious physical costs of scribal work, there's no shortage of young men eager to learn the trade. The combination of intellectual stimulation, social status, and economic security makes copying manuscripts attractive, even to those who understand the long-term health consequences. In a world where most work is backbreaking physical labor performed outdoors in all weather, the chance to work indoors with books and ideas seems worth almost any price. As you continue your work on the Royal Psalter, you're increasingly aware that you're trading your long-term physical health for the opportunity to preserve knowledge and create something beautiful. Every perfect letter you form brings you closer to the completion of a masterpiece that will outlive you by centuries. Every day of strain and discomfort is an investment in a legacy that will survive long after your body has succumbed to the accumulated damage of your chosen profession. The mathematics are inexorable. You have 3 more months of intensive work ahead of you, followed by years or decades of similar projects if you're successful. Your body will continue to adapt to the demands of scribal work, but those adaptations will come at the cost of overall health and mobility. The question isn't whether you'll suffer permanent damage from your career. It's Whether the intellectual and spiritual rewards will justify the physical sacrifice, 4 months into copying the royal psalter, you experience every scribe's worst nightmare. While working on Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," your quill catches on a slight imperfection in the parchment, just as you're forming the letter H in shepherd. The tiny snag causes your hand to jerk involuntarily, creating a blot of ink that spreads across 3 carefully transcribed lines of text. For a moment, you sit frozen in horror, staring at the black stain that has just destroyed hours of meticulous work. The damage is irreversible. Parchment, unlike paper, can't simply be crumpled up and thrown away. Each sheet represents a significant financial investment and months of preparation time. More importantly, this particular sheet contains text that you've already completed, meaning that the error affects not just the current line, but previously finished work. Brother Augustine's footsteps approach your desk with the measured pace of someone who has dealt with countless scribal disasters over 4 decades of supervising manuscript production. He examines the damage in silence, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts as he calculates the implications of your mistake. "How much text is affected?" he asks quietly. 17 lines. You reply, your voice barely above a whisper. 3 hours of completed work, plus the current passage. He nods slowly, understanding immediately that this isn't simply a matter of starting over. The affected parchment sheet contains text from multiple sections of the psalter, meaning that repairing the damage will require careful planning to maintain the overall structure and layout of the manuscript. Can it be salvaged? You ask, though you already know the answer from his expression. The text must be scraped away and recopied, he says with the finality of a doctor pronouncing a terminal diagnosis. The entire sheet will need to be prepared again, and the layout recalculated to ensure consistency with the rest of the manuscript. The process of repairing major scribal errors is almost as difficult as the original copying. First, the damaged area must be carefully scraped with a sharp knife to remove the ink without damaging the underlying parchment. This requires delicate work with a blade held at precisely the right angle to cut through the ink layer without creating holes or rough spots in the writing surface. Brother Simon, who specializes in manuscript repair due to his own history of copying errors, demonstrates the technique with the patient resignation of someone who has performed this unpleasant task many times. The ink penetrates into the parchment fibers, he explains as he works, so complete removal requires scraping away part of the writing surface itself. Too aggressive, and you create a hole. Too gentle, and ink stains remain that will interfere with new text. The scraped area must then be re-prepared with pumice to restore the smooth surface texture required for precise writing. This process often leaves the repaired area slightly thinner than the surrounding parchment, creating subtle differences in how ink flows and letters appear. Expert scribes can often identify repaired sections in ancient manuscripts by these telltale variations in text quality. But the technical challenges of repair pale in comparison to the psychological impact of major errors. The knowledge that months of work can be destroyed by a moment's inattention creates a level of stress that affects every aspect of daily life. Sleep becomes difficult when you're constantly reliving the moment of disaster and imagining potential future mistakes. Eating becomes perfunctory when your stomach is perpetually knotted with anxiety about meeting deadlines despite setbacks. The financial implications of scribal errors are enormous and rarely discussed openly. The materials ruined by your mistake: high-quality vellum, expensive ink, gold for illumination that will now need to be reapplied, represent more money than most people see in a year, while the monastery absorbs these costs as part of business operations. The waste represents resources that could have been used for other purposes. Brother Augustine makes the economics clear during a private conversation about your error. The direct cost of materials is perhaps £5, he explains, but the indirect costs Delayed completion. Disrupted scheduling for Brother Francis's illumination work. Potential dissatisfaction from His Majesty. These are impossible to calculate, but potentially far more significant. The pressure to avoid future errors becomes almost unbearable as you resume work on the repaired section. Every stroke of your quill feels potentially catastrophic. Every slight variation in letter formation creates anxiety about consistency. Every momentary lapse in concentration triggers panic about possible mistakes that might not be discovered. Until hours or days later, other scribes in the monastery treat your error with a mixture of sympathy and superiority that's difficult to endure. Those who have never made major mistakes view your disaster as evidence of inadequate care and attention. Those who have experienced similar catastrophes offer understanding but also serve as uncomfortable reminders that such errors can happen to anyone, regardless of experience or skill level. Brother Michael, whose own copying career was nearly ended by a series of high-profile mistakes, provides the most honest assessment of the psychological aftermath. The fear never completely goes away. He admits during a quiet conversation in the monastery garden, even 20 years later, I find myself checking and rechecking work that I would have completed confidently before my first major error. The knowledge that perfection is impossible but required creates a tension that affects everything you write. The monastery's quality control procedures, while necessary, add another layer of stress to an already demanding process. Your completed pages are now subject to additional scrutiny from Brother Augustine and other senior scribes who examine every letter for signs of inconsistency or potential problems. This oversight is presented as assistance, but it feels like constant judgment of your competence and reliability. The deadline for the Royal Psalter remains unchanged despite your setback, meaning that the lost time must be made up through longer working hours and fewer breaks. Your daily schedule extends from before dawn until well after dark, with meals eaten quickly at your desk and prayers attended only when absolutely required. The physical strain compounds the psychological pressure, creating a feedback loop of stress that affects every aspect of your performance. Sleep deprivation from extended working hours makes future errors more likely, creating a vicious cycle where the pressure to avoid mistakes leads to conditions that make mistakes inevitable. Your hand shakes slightly from fatigue. Your vision blurs from extended close work in poor lighting. Your concentration wavers from exhaustion. All of these factors increase the probability of additional disasters that could completely derail the project. Brother Francis, the illuminator whose work depends on your accurate text completion, makes his displeasure clear through pointed comments about scheduling delays and the importance of maintaining professional standards. His artistic reputation depends partly on the quality of the text he's illuminating, and any additional errors on your part could reflect poorly on his own work. The political implications of delays become apparent when Brother Augustine receives inquiries from royal officials about the project's progress. King Edward III's court operates on schedules that don't accommodate monastic mishaps and the Psalters. Completion date has been planned around specific ceremonial and diplomatic needs. Your error has created ripple effects that extend far beyond the scriptorium walls. As you work to complete the repaired section and resume normal progress on the manuscript, you're acutely aware that the margin for future errors has been eliminated entirely. A second major mistake would likely result in your removal from the project and permanent damage to your career prospects. The Royal Commission that was supposed to establish your reputation as a reliable scribe has instead become a test of your ability to work under maximum pressure without succumbing to the psychological strain. Yet despite the stress and setbacks, you're also aware that dealing with major errors is simply part of a scribe's professional development. Every experienced copyist has stories of disasters overcome, deadlines met despite setbacks, and projects completed successfully after near-catastrophic mistakes. Your current crisis, while personally devastating, is also an opportunity to prove that you possess the resilience and skill necessary for a long-term career in manuscript production. The completed repair, when it's finally finished, is nearly indistinguishable from the original work. The scraped and re-prepared parchment accepts ink normally. The recopied text matches the surrounding script perfectly, and the overall layout maintains the consistency required for a royal commission. But you'll always know where the mistake occurred. And that knowledge serves as a permanent reminder of how quickly years of training and months of careful work can be threatened by a moment's inattention. As you progress deeper into the Psalter, copying increasingly complex and theologically significant passages, you become aware of the delicate political and religious considerations that surround every word in medieval manuscripts. What appears to be straightforward copying work actually involves navigating centuries of theological controversy, political sensitivities, and scholarly debates that can have serious consequences for both individual scribes and the institutions they serve. The Latin text you're copying represents one specific version among many competing translations and interpretations of the original Hebrew Psalms. Your exemplar follows the Vulgate translation completed by St. Jerome in the 4th century. But even this standard text contains variations, corrections, and editorial choices that reflect the theological positions of different schools of thought. Every word you transcribe carries the weight of doctrinal decisions made by scholars whose authority and orthodoxy may be questioned by future generations. Brother Augustine makes the political complexities clear during one of his regular reviews of your progress. The text we're copying, he explains, represents not just sacred scripture, but the official position of the church hierarchy on disputed theological questions. Alternative readings exist for many passages, some of which might be more accurate to the original Hebrew. But our commission requires us to follow the version specifically approved by His Majesty's court chaplains. This means that your role as a scribe extends beyond mechanical copying to include enforcing religious and political orthodoxy through your choice of which textual variants to include. You're not simply preserving ancient wisdom. You're participating in the ongoing process by which institutional authority shapes religious understanding for future generations. The political sensitivities become apparent when you encounter Psalm 72, which contains passages about the responsibilities of kings and the divine source of royal authority. The specific wording of these verses has been the subject of intense debate between secular and ecclesiastical authorities, with different translations supporting different theories about the relationship between temporal and spiritual power. His Majesty has specifically requested, Brother Augustine informs you, that verse 11 be rendered as all kings shall fall down before him, all nations shall serve him, using the Latin servient rather than the alternative ministrabant. This translation emphasizes absolute submission to divine authority rather than collaborative service, which supports the Crown's position in current diplomatic negotiations with France. Such politically motivated textual choices place scribes in difficult positions when their personal scholarship conflicts with official requirements. Brother Thomas, one of the senior scribes, privately expresses doubts about some of the translation choices mandated for the Royal Psalter. The Hebrew original clearly supports a different reading in several key passages. He confides during a quiet moment, but our job is to copy what we're told to copy, not to correct what we believe to be errors. The theological implications of textual choices become even more complex when dealing with passages that touch on controversial doctrinal questions. Psalm 51, which deals with sin, forgiveness, and divine mercy, contains verses that have been interpreted differently by various schools of theological thought. The specific Latin words chosen for translation can subtly support or undermine positions on issues like predestination, free will, and the sacraments. Your training as a scribe included extensive instruction in recognizing and avoiding textual variants that might be considered heretical or politically dangerous. Brother Augustine devoted weeks to teaching you how to identify alternative readings that appear in some manuscripts but have been rejected by orthodox authority. A scribe who inadvertently copies condemned textual variants, he warned, may find himself accused of deliberately spreading heretical doctrine. The monitoring of textual accuracy extends beyond simple proofreading to include theological review by scholars who examine completed manuscripts for doctrinal orthodoxy. Your finished Psalter will be reviewed not only for copying errors, but for any signs that you may have introduced unauthorized readings or interpretations. The distinction between innocent mistakes and deliberate heterodoxy may be difficult to prove, but the consequences of accusation can be severe. Brother Aldrich, whose family connections provide him with information about court politics, shares news about scribes at other monasteries who have faced serious consequences for textual irregularities. The scribe at St. Albans was investigated by episcopal authorities last year. He reports with obvious satisfaction at being privy to important gossip. His gospel manuscript contained readings that suggested sympathy with Wycliffe's teachings about ecclesiastical authority. The investigation concluded that the errors were inadvertent, but his career was effectively ended. The pressure to maintain absolute textual orthodoxy creates an atmosphere of paranoia that affects every aspect of scribal work. You find yourself constantly second-guessing your exemplar, checking and rechecking controversial passages against approved references, and seeking confirmation from senior scribes before proceeding with potentially sensitive text. The fear of inadvertent heresy becomes almost as stressful as the technical demands of accurate copying. The international implications of textual choices add another layer of complexity to your work. The royal psalter will be sent to other European courts as a diplomatic gift, meaning that foreign scholars will examine every word for evidence of English theological positions on disputed questions. French and German clerics will scrutinize your text for signs of heterodoxy that could be used to undermine English credibility. In ecclesiastical matters, remember, Brother Augustine emphasizes during one of his inspections that this manuscript represents not just your personal craftsmanship, but the orthodoxy and scholarship of English Christianity. Foreign critics will examine every detail for evidence of doctrinal error or intellectual inadequacy. Your accuracy reflects on the entire English Church. The scholarly debates surrounding specific textual choices often involve issues that are beyond your training as a scribe, but which you're expected to navigate correctly through adherence to approved authorities. Questions about the proper translation of Hebrew verb tenses, the theological implications of specific Greek prepositions, and the historical context of particular psalms all influence the Latin text you're copying. But your understanding of these issues is necessarily limited. Brother Francis, the Illuminator, faces similar political pressures in his artistic choices. The miniature paintings and decorative borders he's adding to your text must reflect approved iconographic traditions, while avoiding visual elements that might be interpreted as supporting condemned theological positions. A misplaced halo or inappropriate symbolic representation could create the same kind of political problems as textual errors. The cumulative effect of these political and theological pressures is to transform what might seem like straightforward copying work into a complex exercise in institutional loyalty and orthodox scholarship. Every word you write must pass multiple tests: accuracy to your exemplar, conformity to approved textual traditions, orthodoxy according to current church teaching, and political acceptability to royal authorities as you work through the most theologically significant sections of the Psalter. You're constantly aware that your role extends far beyond mechanical transcription. You're participating in the ongoing process by which religious and Political authorities shape the textual foundation of Christian civilization. The words you copy will be read, studied, and cited by scholars, clerics, and political leaders whose understanding of divine truth will be influenced by the accuracy and orthodoxy of your work. The responsibility is both inspiring and terrifying. You're helping to preserve and transmit the sacred wisdom that forms the foundation of medieval Christian society. But you're also aware that any errors or irregularities in your work could have consequences that extend far beyond your personal career prospects. The political and theological stakes of scribal accuracy make every letter you write a potential source of controversy that could affect diplomatic relations, ecclesiastical, politics, and doctrinal development as you enter the final 2 months of work on the Royal Psalter. Brother Augustine provides you with insights into the economic realities of manuscript production that illuminate both the value of your work and the financial pressures that shape every aspect of the scriptorium's operations. The numbers are staggering in a way that highlights just how expensive knowledge was in the medieval world. The materials for this single manuscript, he explains during one of your regular progress meetings, cost more than a skilled craftsman earns in 5 years. The vellum alone represents the skins of nearly 30 calves, each worth more than a peasant family's annual income. The ink requires rare imported ingredients that cost their weight in silver. The gold leaf for illumination costs more than a knight's destrier. These economic realities explain many aspects of scribal life that otherwise seem arbitrary or unnecessarily demanding. The obsessive attention to avoiding waste, the careful preservation of even small scraps of parchment, the elaborate procedures for quality control. All of these practices reflect the enormous financial investment that each manuscript represents. The labor costs are equally impressive when calculated in terms of medieval wages and living standards. Your 6 months of full-time work on the Psalter, combined with Brother Francis's illumination work and the various support tasks performed by apprentices and lay workers, represents more human labor than most people could afford to purchase for any purpose. The finished manuscript will be worth more than most noble families' annual income. A completed Psalter of this quality, Brother Augustine continues, could be traded for a substantial estate, a year's military campaign, or the entire livestock holdings of a prosperous manor. We're not simply copying words. We're creating one of the most valuable portable objects in the medieval world. The economic value of manuscripts explains the intense security measures that surround their production and storage. The monastery's library is guarded more carefully than its treasury, because in many ways the manuscripts represent a more concentrated form of wealth than coins or precious metals. A single card full of finished manuscripts could contain more value than the annual tax revenue of an entire county. The international market for luxury manuscripts drives much of the scriptorium's production schedule and influences the types of projects that receive priority. Wealthy Italian merchants will pay enormous sums for beautifully illuminated prayer books. German princes compete to commission the most elaborate chronicles of their family histories. French nobles seek English-produced manuscripts as exotic luxury items that demonstrate their sophisticated tastes. The Holy Roman Emperor, Brother Augustine reveals, has standing orders with 3 English monasteries for any exceptionally fine manuscripts that become available. His agents regularly visit scriptoriums throughout England, offering prices that few other customers can match. A single imperial commission can fund the monastery's operations for years. The economics of manuscript production also explain the complex relationships between monasteries, secular authorities, and wealthy patrons. Kings and nobles don't simply commission manuscripts as luxury items. They're making strategic investments in institutions that provide essential services for governance, diplomacy, and cultural prestige. The monastery's ability to produce high-quality manuscripts directly affects its political influence and economic independence. Royal commissions, like your Psalter, serve multiple economic functions beyond their obvious religious and cultural purposes. They demonstrate the crown's ability to command the finest craftsmanship available, provide diplomatic gifts that convey both wealth and sophistication, and support institutions that train the literate. Administrators essential for effective governance. His Majesty's investment in the Psalter, Brother Augustine explains, will return value in ways that extend far beyond the manuscript itself. The completed work will enhance England's cultural reputation throughout Europe, provide a diplomatic tool for negotiations with other Christian kingdoms, and demonstrate royal support for the church institutions that provide essential administrative services. The apprenticeship system that trains new scribes represents another significant economic investment that affects the entire industry. Each apprentice requires years of training, during which they consume expensive materials while producing work of little commercial value. The monastery's ability to train the next generation of scribes depends on profits from current commissions being sufficient to subsidize future craftsmen. Your own training as a scribe involved consuming hundreds of sheets of practice parchment, countless gallons of ink, and thousands of hours of instruction from experienced craftsmen. The monastery's investment in your education will only be recovered if you remain productive for many years and eventually train apprentices yourself, continuing the cycle of knowledge transfer that maintains the institution's capabilities. The international competition between scriptoriums affects both the quality, standards, and the economic pressures that shape daily operations. Customers with sufficient wealth to commission luxury manuscripts can afford to be extremely selective about which institutions receive their patronage. A reputation for inferior work can destroy a scriptorium's market position within a single generation. The scriptorium at Reims, Brother Augustine notes with professional interest, has lost 3 major commissions this year because their recent work has been considered inferior to what's available from English and German monasteries. Their economic situation has become so difficult that they're considering accepting commissions for legal documents and commercial correspondence, work that pays adequately but lacks the prestige of religious manuscripts. The seasonal nature of manuscript production creates additional economic pressures that affect working conditions and production schedules. Winter months are ideal for indoor precision work, but they're also when heating costs are highest and natural light is most limited. Summer provides better working conditions, but competes with agricultural responsibilities that many monasteries depend on for economic survival. The political stability required for luxury manuscript production makes the industry particularly vulnerable to warfare, political upheaval, and economic disruption. The ongoing conflicts between England and France have already affected international markets for English manuscripts, as French customers become reluctant to purchase works from enemy territories regardless of their quality. The war with France, Brother Augustine observes with obvious concern, has cost us at least 6 major commissions this year. French nobles who previously competed for our finest manuscripts are now commissioning work from Italian and German scriptoriums. If the conflict continues, we may need to seek new markets in Spain or the Holy Roman Empire. The economic pressures also affect the types of texts that receive priority for copying and preservation. Religious works remain the most prestigious and profitable, but there's growing demand for secular literature, technical treatises, and legal documents that reflect the increasing complexity of medieval society. Balancing these market demands with the monastery's religious mission creates ongoing tensions about resource allocation. As you work through the final stages of the Royal Psalter, you're acutely aware that your labor is creating something that represents one of the medieval world's most concentrated forms of value. The manuscript you're completing will be worth more than most people see in their entire lifetimes. And its creation requires skills and resources that are available to only a tiny fraction of the population. The economic realities of manuscript production provide sobering context for understanding both the opportunities and pressures that define scribal careers. Success in this field can provide economic security, social status, and access to the folded intellectual treasures of medieval civilization. But the financial stakes involved mean that errors, delays, or quality problems can have consequences that extend far beyond individual disappointment to affect entire institutions and their ability to survive in an increasingly competitive market. 5 months into your work on the Royal Psalter, the psychological isolation that comes with intensive intellectual labor has begun to affect your relationships with other monks and your sense of connection to the broader monastery community. The demanding schedule of manuscript production creates a form of social separation that's as challenging as the physical and technical aspects of scribal work. Your daily routine has become so specialized and time-consuming that you rarely interact with monks whose duties don't directly relate to manuscript production. While other brothers gather for communal meals, recreation, and informal conversation, you eat quickly at your desk to maintain productivity. While they participate in the full cycle of daily prayers, you attend only the services that are absolutely required, spending the rest of your time hunched over parchment and ink. The intellectual demands of your work create another barrier to normal social interaction. After spending 14 hours focused on precise letter forms, theological texts, and complex formatting requirements, casual conversation feels trivial and mentally exhausting. The concentration required for scribal work doesn't simply end when you set down your quill. It continues to occupy mental resources that would otherwise be available for social engagement. Brother Peter, who works in the monastery's gardens, occasionally attempts to engage you in conversation during brief breaks between prayer services. His accounts of plant cultivation, seasonal changes, and agricultural planning, topics that would once have seemed interesting, now feel like intrusions on mental space that needs to be preserved for manuscript work. You find yourself nodding politely while thinking about letter spacing and ink. Consistency. You've become like the books you copy. Brother Peter observes with more insight than he probably realizes. Present in body but living in a world of words and ideas that the rest of us can't share. The specialized knowledge required for professional scribing creates a form of intellectual isolation that's particularly pronounced in medieval society, where literacy itself is rare and the technical aspects of manuscript production are understood by only a tiny fraction of the population. Even within the monastery, only the handful of monks directly involved in scribal work can appreciate the complexities and challenges of your daily labor. Your conversations with other scribes, while professionally valuable, often revolve around technical details that would bore or confuse outsiders. Discussions about ink formulations, parchment preparation, letter spacing, and textual variants become consuming interests that leave little mental energy for broader topics. The shared language of scribal expertise creates bonds with your colleagues, but deepens the gap between you and the larger community. Brother Francis, the illuminator, understands this isolation from his own experience with specialized artistic work. The deeper you go into any craft, he reflects during one of your collaborative sessions, the harder it becomes to explain what you're doing to people who haven't made the same journey. They see us sitting quietly at our desks and think we're living peaceful, contemplative lives. They don't understand that we're fighting daily battles with materials, deadlines, and our own limitations. The physical separation required for manuscript work compounds the social isolation. The scriptorium is necessarily quiet with conversation, limited to brief, whispered consultations about technical problems. The concentration required for precision copying makes extended dialogue impossible during working hours. Even meals eaten at your desk are consumed in silence to avoid disturbing other scribes' focus. Your sleep patterns have also become different from those of other monks, creating another barrier to community participation. The extended working hours required to meet royal deadlines mean that you often work well past compline, the final prayer service of the day. You retire later than other brothers and often wake earlier to take advantage of the best natural light. This shifted schedule reduces opportunities for informal interaction and community building. The intellectual content of your work creates psychological distance from monks whose duties are primarily physical or administrative. While they deal with concrete problems, crop yields, building maintenance, visitor accommodations, you spend your days immersed in abstract theological concepts and linguistic precision. The different mental frameworks required for these activities make casual conversation difficult and often unsatisfying. Brother William, who manages the monastery's financial affairs, sometimes attempts to discuss practical matters that affect scriptorium operations, material costs, commission deadlines, patron relationships, but his focus on economic efficiency often conflicts with your concern for scholarly accuracy and artistic quality. Conversations that should be collaborative problem-solving sessions become exercises in mutual frustration as you struggle to communicate across different professional perspectives. The seasonal rhythms that structure agricultural and administrative work in the monastery have little relevance to manuscript production, creating another form of temporal isolation. While other monks' activities change dramatically between planting and harvest seasons, your work remains essentially constant regardless of weather or agricultural cycles. The disconnect from natural rhythms contributes to a sense of existing in an artificial, text-based world that's removed from the physical reality that governs most medieval life. Your growing expertise in theological texts and scholarly methodology has also begun to create intellectual distance from monks whose religious education is more practical and devotional. You find yourself noticing textual inconsistencies, translation problems, and theological subtleties that escape brothers whose faith is more straightforward and less analytically complex. This enhanced critical awareness, while professionally valuable, can make simple devotional exercises feel intellectually superficial. The pride that comes with mastering a demanding and prestigious craft creates its own form of social separation. You're aware that your skills are rare and valuable, that few people could perform your work competently, and that your contributions to the monastery's reputation and economic success are significant. This knowledge can breed a subtle sense of superiority that affects your interactions with monks whose work seems less intellectually demanding. Brother Augustine recognizes the isolation that affects all career scribes and makes efforts to maintain connections between manuscript workers and the broader monastery community. He regularly assigns scribes to assist with other duties, helping in the library, teaching literacy to younger monks, participating in ceremonial functions that showcase the scriptorium's work. But these efforts can feel forced and artificial. When your mind remains occupied with unfinished manuscripts and looming deadlines, the danger of our work, Brother Augustine observes, is not just physical damage to eyes and hands, but spiritual damage to our sense of community and humility. Knowledge can become a prison as confining as ignorance, just more comfortable for those who possess it. The correspondence that accompanies major commissions provides occasional glimpses into the broader world of scholarship and political power that exists beyond monastery walls. Letters from royal officials, other scriptoriums, and international scholars remind you that your work is part of a larger network of intellectual activity. But these contacts also highlight how removed your daily experience has become from normal social interaction. As you approach the completion of the Royal Psalter, you're aware that the successful completion of this commission will likely lead to additional prestigious assignments that will deepen your specialization and further separate you from the communal life that originally attracted you to monastic vocation. The path toward expertise and professional success seems to lead inevitably toward intellectual isolation and social separation. The irony isn't lost on you that your work involves preserving and transmitting texts that emphasize community, charity, and human connection. While the demands of that work systematically erode your own ability to maintain meaningful relationships with the people around you, the sacred words you copy speak of love, fellowship, and mutual support, but your daily experience is increasingly characterized by solitude, competition, and professional pressure. As you enter the final month of work on the Royal Psalter, the accumulated stress of maintaining absolute accuracy under intense deadline pressure has begun to manifest in ways that affect every aspect of your daily life. The knowledge that you're approaching the end of 6 months of intensive labor creates a psychological state that combines exhaustion, anxiety, and desperate determination to avoid any mistakes that could ruin the entire project. Your sleep has become increasingly troubled, filled with dreams about ink blots, skipped lines, and textual errors. You often wake with your hand cramped. In a writing position, having spent the night unconsciously forming letters on imaginary parchment, the fear of making a catastrophic mistake in the final stages has created a level of hypervigilance that makes rest almost impossible. The physical symptoms of chronic stress have become impossible to ignore. Your appetite has decreased significantly as anxiety affects your digestive system. Your hand shakes slightly when you're not actively writing, a tremor that you must consciously control when picking up your quill. Your vision has begun to blur more frequently, whether from eye strain or stress-induced tension headaches. Brother Augustine has noticed a deterioration in your condition and attempts to provide encouragement while maintaining the pressure necessary to ensure timely completion. The final weeks of any major commission are always the most difficult. He acknowledges during one of his daily inspections the accumulated fatigue, the pressure of approaching deadlines, the fear of last-minute disasters. These affect every scribe, no matter how experienced. But his reassurances feel hollow when weighed against the consequences of failure. A major error in the final pages would be even more devastating than the mistake you made earlier, because there would be no time to repair the damage before the Michaelmas deadline. The royal court schedule doesn't accommodate monastic mishaps, and failure to deliver the completed Psalter on time could damage Canterbury's relationship with the crown for years. The quality standards for the final pages must remain as high as those for the beginning of the manuscript, despite your deteriorating physical and mental condition. Each letter must be formed with the same precision that characterized your work 6 months ago. The spacing, alignment, and consistency that royal commissioners expect can't be compromised just because you're exhausted and stressed. Brother Francis, the illuminator has begun working on sections that you've already completed, creating additional pressure to maintain perfect coordination between text and artwork. Any errors discovered in your completed pages at this stage would require him to redo illumination work that represents weeks of effort and expensive materials. The interdependence of your crafts means that your mistakes affect not just your own work, but the entire project's success. The other scribes in the monastery watch your progress with a mixture of sympathy and professional interest. Those who have completed major commissions understand the pressure you're experiencing, while junior scribes observe your struggle as a preview of what awaits them if they advance to prestigious assignments. Your success or failure will be studied and discussed long after the Psalter is completed. The final month is where careers are made or broken, confides Brother Michael during a brief conversation in the monastery garden. Technical skill can carry you through most of a commission, but completing a major work requires something beyond craftsmanship, a combination of mental toughness, physical endurance, and sheer stubborn will that not everyone possesses. The psychological pressure of working on sacred text adds another dimension to the stress. The Psalms you're copying contain some of the most important religious poetry. In the Christian tradition, these words have provided comfort and guidance to believers for centuries, and your accuracy in transcribing them affects how future readers will understand and experience their faith. The responsibility for preserving divine revelation feels overwhelming when combined with the practical pressures of deadline completion. Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High requires particular care because it contains complex Hebrew concepts that must be rendered precisely in Latin translation. The theological implications of specific word choices have been debated by scholars for centuries, and your commission requires following approved textual variants that reflect current church doctrine. A single miscopied word could create theological confusion that might not be discovered for years. The financial pressures add another layer of stress that affects your ability to maintain perspective on the project's significance. The materials you're working with represent more money than you'll see in your lifetime. The patronage relationship with the royal court that depends on successful completion could affect the monastery's economic position for decades. Your individual performance has implications that extend far beyond personal career advancement. Brother Augustine attempts to help you manage the stress through various strategies developed over his decades of experience with high-pressure commissions. Focus only on the current line, he advises. Don't think about pages still to be completed or deadlines still to be met. Perfect the letter you're forming right now, then move to the next one. Break the enormous task into manageable pieces. But this advice proves difficult to follow when the accumulated fatigue makes concentration increasingly difficult. Your mind wanders despite your best efforts to maintain focus. You find yourself reading the same passage multiple times before comprehending its meaning. Simple words begin to look strange and unfamiliar after hours of intensive copying. The fear of making errors has become so intense that you've begun double-checking every word immediately after writing it. A practice that slows your progress and increases anxiety rather than providing reassurance. The extra scrutiny often reveals minor imperfections that would normally be acceptable, but now seem like potential disasters requiring correction. Brother Simon, who has developed his own techniques for managing stress during demanding projects, suggests prayer and meditation as ways to maintain mental equilibrium. Remember that you're serving God through this work, he reminds you. The pressure comes from human expectations and earthly concerns. Divine grace is sufficient to complete any task that serves righteous purposes. But spiritual comfort proves difficult to access when your mind is consumed with technical details and deadline anxiety. Prayer feels like another task competing for mental resources that are already stretched beyond their limits. Even religious consolation becomes complicated by the knowledge that your scribal errors could affect how others experience their own spiritual lives. The home stretch of the Royal Psalter has become a test of endurance that goes beyond technical skill to challenge every aspect of your character and resilience. The young monk who began this commission 6 months ago with enthusiasm and confidence has been transformed by the experience into someone who understands the true cost of creating something perfect in an imperfect world. Yet despite the stress and exhaustion, you're also aware that you're approaching the completion of something extraordinary. The manuscript, taking shape under your hands, represents the highest achievement of medieval craftsmanship and scholarship. When finished, it will serve as a tool for royal devotion, a diplomatic gift that enhances England's cultural reputation, and a lasting monument to the skill and dedication of everyone involved in its creation. The final pages await, each one a potential triumph or disaster. Each letter a test of everything you've learned about the craft of preserving human knowledge. In an age when such preservation requires extraordinary personal sacrifice. September 15th, 1347. 2 weeks remain until the Michaelmas deadline, and you're entering the most intense period of work in your entire scribal career. The final 14 pages of the Royal Psalter must be completed with the same precision and artistry that characterized the beginning of the project. Despite your exhausted condition and the overwhelming pressure of approaching deadlines, your daily schedule has been extended to nearly 18 hours of active writing, with breaks only for the most essential prayer services and hurried meals consumed at your desk. The monastery's normal rhythms have been suspended to accommodate your emergency timeline. Other monks have taken over your routine duties, and Brother Augustine has assigned apprentices to handle basic tasks like quill preparation and ink mixing that would normally occupy part of your working time. The physical toll of this final sprint is severe and immediately apparent. Your right hand has developed almost constant cramping that must be massaged away every few hours. Your vision blurs regularly from eye strain, requiring frequent breaks to rest your eyes and refocus on fine details. Your posture has deteriorated to the point where standing upright causes sharp pain in your lower back and neck. This is the crucible, Brother Augustine explains during one of his increasingly frequent check-ins on your progress. Every major commission ends with a period that tests everything you've learned about managing your body, your mind, and your tools under maximum stress. The scribes who survive this final sprint are the ones who go on to handle the most prestigious commissions throughout their careers. The remaining text includes some of the most complex and theologically significant passages in the entire Psalter. Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Book of Psalms, requires particular attention because its acrostic structure in Hebrew creates translation challenges that must be reflected accurately in the Latin text. Each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet, a pattern that influences word choice and phrasing throughout the entire 176-verse composition. The pressure to maintain perfect accuracy becomes almost unbearable when you realize that errors at this stage would be catastrophic in ways that go beyond financial cost or deadline pressure. Brother Francis has already completed illumination work for the early sections of the manuscript and is working on decorative elements for pages that you've recently finished. Any errors discovered now would require him to redo completed artwork, potentially making it impossible to meet the royal deadline, even if text completion proceeds flawlessly. Your concentration has become so intense that you've begun to experience a form of tunnel vision, where the immediate words you're copying seem to exist in isolation from their larger context. The theological meaning of the Psalms, which normally provides intellectual satisfaction and spiritual enrichment, has been reduced to sequences of letters that must be formed correctly regardless of their content. The sacred text has become abstract visual information that must be processed and reproduced with mechanical precision. The other scribes in the monastery observe your final sprint with fascination and concern. Some offer encouragement and practical assistance, preparing fresh quills, mixing new batches of ink, providing meals that can be eaten quickly without interrupting workflow. Others maintain respectful distance, understanding that concentration at this level can't tolerate unnecessary interruptions or social obligations. Brother Michael, whose own experience with high-pressure deadlines provides valuable perspective, offers practical advice about managing the psychological stress of final completion. The temptation is to rush through the remaining work to reach the finish line as quickly as possible, he warns. But hurried copying in the final stages creates more errors than careful work throughout the entire project. Maintain your normal pace and trust that there's sufficient time to complete the work properly. But maintaining normal pace proves almost impossible when every instinct screams for acceleration toward the approaching deadline. Your body has become accustomed to the rhythm of sustained, intensive work, but your mind rebels against the knowledge that weeks of effort could still be destroyed by a moment's carelessness. The psychological tension between the need for speed and the requirement for accuracy creates a form of mental strain that's unlike anything you've experienced in normal copying work. The monastery's daily prayers have taken on special significance, as various brothers offer supplications for your success and the timely completion of the royal commission. Abbot Geoffrey leads special intercessions during evening services, asking divine assistance for the preservation of your health and the perfection of your craftsmanship. The entire community has become invested in your individual success in ways that increase pressure while providing spiritual support. The weather has become a factor in your ability to maintain productivity. September brings shorter days and increasingly unreliable natural light, forcing you to depend more heavily on candles and oil lamps for detailed work. The flickering illumination creates additional eye strain and makes it harder to maintain the consistent letter quality required for royal standards. Rain and clouds can reduce available light so dramatically that progress becomes almost impossible during daylight hours. Your sleep, when you can manage to achieve it, has become dominated by scribal anxiety dreams that provide no rest from the daytime pressures. You dream of ink blots spreading across completed pages, of skipped lines that require extensive correction, of deadlines passed with work still incomplete. The boundary between sleeping and waking stress has largely disappeared, creating a continuous state of low-level panic that affects every aspect of your consciousness. Brother Francis has begun working alongside you during these final weeks, adding illuminated capitals and decorative borders to pages as soon as you complete them. His presence creates additional pressure because you can see immediately how your text quality affects his artistic work. Slightly uneven letter spacing becomes apparent when decorative elements are added. Minor inconsistencies in line alignment become obvious when illuminated borders are applied. Your text provides the foundation for everything I do. He reminds you as he works on an elaborate initial letter that begins Psalm 150. Precision in your letter forms makes my artwork possible. Errors in spacing or alignment force me to make compromises that reduce the overall quality of the finished manuscript. The coordination required between your text completion and his illumination work has created a complex schedule, where delays in your copying create cascading problems for artistic elements that can't be easily corrected. The interdependence of your crafts means that the final 2 weeks require perfect collaboration between tired, stressed professionals whose individual mistakes affect the entire project. As you work through Psalm 150, the final chapter of the Psalter, you're acutely aware that you're approaching the completion of the most challenging and important project of your career. Each verse brings you closer to success, but also closer to the final opportunity for catastrophic error. The last lines of the manuscript will be the most scrutinized because they represent the culmination of 6 months of intensive labor and the final test of your ability to maintain royal standards. Under maximum pressure, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. The final verse of the final psalm awaits your transcription as both a triumphant conclusion to sacred scripture and a personal prayer for the successful completion of work that has consumed your life and tested your limits as a craftsman and human being. September 29th, 1347, the feast of Saint Michael the Archangel, at 4:47 in the afternoon, as the bells of Canterbury Cathedral ring for Vespers, you complete the final letter of the final word of the Royal Psalter. Hallelujah! Let everything that has breath praise the Lord ends with a perfectly formed H that brings to conclusion 6 months of the most intensive and demanding work of your life. For a moment, you sit in absolute stillness, afraid to believe that the enormous task is actually finished. Your right hand, still gripping the quill that has become an extension of your body, trembles slightly from exhaustion and relief. The completed manuscript lies before you minus 300 pages of flawless Gothic script, ready for Brother Francis's final illumination touches before delivery to His Majesty's court. Brother Augustine approaches your desk with the measured pace of someone who has witnessed the completion of dozens of major commissions throughout his 40-year career. He examines the final page with the critical eye of a master craftsman, checking letter spacing, line alignment, and consistency with the standards established at the beginning of the project. Exemplary work, he pronounces after a thorough inspection that seems to last forever, but probably takes only minutes. The quality remains consistent throughout. His Majesty will be well pleased with Canterbury's craftsmanship. The simple words of professional approval trigger an emotional release that surprises you with its intensity. 6 months of accumulated stress, anxiety, and exhaustion pour out in a mixture of tears and laughter that would be embarrassing under normal circumstances, but feels entirely appropriate given what you've just accomplished. The other scribes in the monastery gather around your desk to examine the completed manuscript and offer congratulations on work that they understand better than anyone else could. These men know exactly what you've endured: the physical pain, the mental fatigue, the constant pressure of maintaining perfection under impossible deadlines. Their recognition means more than any royal approval could. Brother Francis begins the delicate process of adding final illumination elements to the last pages while the ink is still fresh, enough to accept gold leaf and mineral pigments. His artistic work will transform your precise black text into an explosion of color and decoration that befits a royal commission. But the foundation of his artistry is the accuracy and consistency of the letter forms you've spent 6 months perfecting. Your script provides the perfect framework for illumination. He tells you as he begins outlining decorative capitals with a precision that matches your own textual work. Consistent letter height, perfect line spacing, flawless alignment. These technical achievements make artistic excellence possible. The completed manuscript weighs nearly 20 pounds, the physical embodiment of months of intellectual and artistic labor. Each page represents hours of concentrated effort, and the cumulative result is a masterpiece that will survive for centuries as testimony to medieval craftsmanship at its highest level. The knowledge that your work will outlive you by hundreds of years provides a sense of achievement that transcends the immediate satisfaction of meeting deadlines and royal expectations. Brother Augustine assigns 2 junior scribes to begin the careful process of preparing the manuscript for delivery to the royal court. The pages must be checked one final time for any errors that might have escaped notice, then arranged in proper order and secured with protective covers that will prevent damage during transport. Every detail of presentation must reflect the high standards expected for royal commissions. The economic value of the completed manuscript is staggering when calculated in medieval terms. The materials alone, vellum, ink, gold leaf, binding materials, represent more wealth than most people see in their entire lifetimes. The skilled labor invested in creating the text and illuminations could have been used to construct buildings, equip armies, or support entire communities for months. You've helped create one of the most valuable portable objects in the medieval world. But the cultural and spiritual value of the manuscript extends far beyond its economic worth. The Psalter you've completed will serve as a tool for royal devotion, connecting England's monarch to the same sacred texts that have guided Christian rulers for centuries. The words you've copied will be read, studied, and cited by scholars, clerics, and political leaders whose understanding of divine truth will be influenced by the accuracy of your transcription. The diplomatic implications of successful completion become apparent when Brother Augustine shares news about the manuscript's intended use. His Majesty plans to present copies to the French and German courts as gifts that demonstrate English cultural achievement. He reveals, "Your craftsmanship will represent our kingdom's scholarly and artistic capabilities to the most sophisticated audiences in Europe." The personal transformation you've undergone during the 6 months of intensive scribal work becomes apparent. As you attempt to adjust to normal monastery routines, the hypervigilance required for precision copying doesn't simply disappear when the project ends. Your mind continues to notice minor textual variations, spacing irregularities, and letterform inconsistencies that would previously have passed unobserved. The analytical skills developed through months of detailed copying have become permanent changes to how you process written information. Your body bears permanent marks of the scribal profession that will remain visible for the rest of your life. The calluses on your fingers, the ink stains that no amount of washing can completely remove, the slight forward curve to your shoulders. These physical changes mark you as a professional copyist as clearly as any guild certification. The temporary damage from intensive work will fade, but the long-term adaptations will remain. The immediate aftermath of completion brings its own challenges as you struggle to adjust to a daily routine that doesn't revolve around manuscript deadlines and quality standards. The mental intensity required for 6 months of precision copying has created habits of thought and attention that don't easily transfer to other activities. Normal monastery duties feel simultaneously trivial and surprisingly difficult after months of work that demanded absolute concentration. Brother Augustine recognizes the adjustment difficulties that affect all scribes after completing major commissions and provides guidance based on his decades of experience managing such transitions. Allow yourself time to decompress from the intensity, he advises. Your mind and body need weeks to adjust to normal rhythms after months of emergency productivity. The skills you've developed will remain, but the stress patterns must be allowed to fade. The completion of the Royal Psalter represents a milestone in your development as a professional scribe that opens doors to future commissions while establishing your reputation as someone capable of handling the most demanding and prestigious projects. Word of your successful completion spreads quickly through the network of monasteries, courts, and wealthy patrons who commission luxury manuscripts. Your name becomes associated with quality and reliability in a field where both are rare and valuable. As evening prayers begin on the day of completion, you participate in services with a sense of gratitude and accomplishment that transforms familiar prayers into personal expressions of thanksgiving. The words of the Psalms you've spent 6 months copying take on new meaning when offered as prayers of thanksgiving for the successful completion of work that tested every aspect of your character and capability. The manuscript that began as blank parchment and an overwhelming commission has become a masterpiece that will serve scholars, saints, and kings for centuries to come. Your contribution to the preservation and transmission of human knowledge has been completed successfully, adding another volume to the great library of medieval learning that connects past wisdom to future understanding. Tonight, for the first time in 6 months, you'll sleep without dreaming of ink blots, missed deadlines, or textual errors. The Royal Psalter is complete, and your transformation from promising junior scribe to proven master craftsman is equally finished. Tomorrow will bring new projects, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve the cause of preserving human knowledge through the demanding but rewarding craft of medieval manuscript production. October 15th, 1347. 2 weeks after completing the Royal Psalter, you're still struggling to adjust to a daily routine that doesn't revolve around manuscript deadlines and the constant pressure of maintaining absolute accuracy. The psychological intensity required for 6 months of precision copying has created mental habits that don't easily transfer to normal monastery life. Brother Augustine has assigned you to routine copying tasks, prayer books for local parishes, administrative documents for monastery business, personal correspondence for literate nobles, work that would have seemed challenging and important 6 months ago, but now feels almost trivial after completing a royal commission. The reduced pressure is simultaneously relieving and disorienting. Your body has begun to recover from the extreme demands of intensive scribal work. but the process reveals damage that will likely be permanent. The vision problems that develop during months of close work and poor lighting don't seem to be improving with rest. Your hands still cramp regularly, and the fine motor control required for precision letter forms has been affected by accumulated strain. Brother Infirmarius, the monastery's medical specialist, examines your condition with the limited diagnostic tools available in medieval medicine. The eyes show signs of permanent weakness. He concludes after having you read text at various distances. The hand muscles have developed contractures that may not fully resolve. These are common afflictions among scribes, but they typically worsen with continued intensive work. The long-term career implications of physical damage become apparent as you realize that your ability to handle future royal commissions may be compromised by accumulated wear on the body parts most essential for scribal work. The success that was supposed to establish your reputation as a master craftsman has come at the cost of physical capacity that may limit future opportunities. News arrives from the royal court about the reception of the completed psalter, bringing professional satisfaction that helps offset concerns about personal health consequences. His Majesty King Edward III has expressed complete satisfaction with the quality of the manuscript and has specifically requested that Canterbury Cathedral be given priority consideration for future royal commissions. The King's chaplains have examined every page. Brother Augustine reports with obvious pride and found the work to be flawless in accuracy and exceptional in artistry. His Majesty has ordered 3 additional copies to be made for diplomatic presentation to foreign courts, and he's requested that you personally supervise the copying to ensure consistency with the original. The request for additional copies represents both tremendous professional recognition and a daunting prospect given your current physical condition. 3 more manuscripts of equal quality would require another 18 months of intensive work, potentially causing permanent damage that could end your scribal career entirely. The success that should secure your future has created opportunities that might destroy your ability to take advantage of them. The financial rewards of completing the Royal Commission exceed anything you've previously experienced. Though they come in forms that reflect medieval economic realities rather than modern concepts of salary and benefits, the monastery receives payment that strengthens its economic position for years to come. Your individual compensation includes better living quarters, improved meals, access to the finest materials for future projects, and informal privileges that make daily life significantly more comfortable. Brother Augustine explains the economic impact of your success in terms that illuminate both the opportunities and pressures that await successful scribes. Royal patronage creates a cycle of prestige and profit that can sustain a scriptorium for decades, he observes. But it also creates expectations that must be met consistently, or the relationship deteriorates rapidly. Your excellent work has opened doors, but those doors will only remain open if we continue to exceed royal expectations. The reputation you've established through the Psalter Commission has begun to attract attention from other wealthy patrons who compete for access to proven craftsmen. Requests arrive from foreign nobles, church officials, and wealthy merchants who seek manuscripts of comparable quality to the royal Psalter. The demand for your services exceeds your physical capacity to fulfill commissions, creating the need for difficult decisions about which opportunities to pursue. The monastery's long-term planning must now account for your value as a master scribe, whose reputation enhances the institution's ability to attract prestigious commissions. Your success has made you a valuable asset whose health and productivity must be carefully managed to maximize long-term benefits. The individual recognition you've earned has made you simultaneously more important and more constrained within the institutional hierarchy. Your relationships with other scribes have been affected by the success and recognition that accompany completion of royal commissions. Some colleagues express genuine admiration and seek to learn from your experience. Others display resentment. about opportunities and recognition that they believe should have been distributed more equally among qualified craftsmen. Brother Philip, whose envy was apparent throughout your work on the Psalter, makes pointed comments about the favoritism and political connections that he believes influenced your selection for the commission. Technical skill is only part of what determines who receives the best assignments. He observes with obvious bitterness, family background and personal relationships often matter more than demonstrated ability. The psychological aftermath of completing such an intensive and demanding project includes emotional responses that surprise you with their complexity. The sense of accomplishment and professional pride is accompanied by a form of depression that follows the end of work that provided structure and meaning for 6 months of your life. The absence of urgent deadlines and constant pressure creates a vacuum that normal activities don't seem able to fill. Brother Augustine recognizes the emotional challenges that affect scribes after completing major commissions and provides guidance based on his experience with similar transitions. The intensity of commission work creates a form of excitement that's difficult to maintain during routine copying. He acknowledges many scribes struggle with feelings of emptiness and purposelessness after finishing projects that demanded everything they had to give. The knowledge that you've created something that will survive for centuries provides long-term satisfaction that helps offset the immediate sense of anticlimax. The manuscript you completed will be read by scholars, studied by theologians, and cherished by art lovers long after everyone involved in its creation has been forgotten. Your contribution to the preservation of human knowledge has achieved a form of immortality that transcends individual mortality. The skills you've developed through months of intensive copying have applications beyond manuscript production that create new opportunities for advancement within the monastery hierarchy. Your enhanced understanding of theological texts, improved knowledge of Latin grammar and syntax, and demonstrated ability to work under pressure make you valuable for teaching, administration, and scholarly research. The transformation from promising junior scribe to proven master craftsman has been completed, but the path forward remains uncertain. The success that was supposed to establish your career has created physical limitations that may constrain future opportunities. The recognition that should provide security has generated expectations and pressures that may prove impossible to sustain. As autumn deepens and winter approaches, you're faced with decisions about how to manage the opportunities and limitations created by your success. The Royal Commission that tested every aspect of your character and capability has ended, but the consequences of that test will shape the rest of your career and life in ways that are only beginning to become apparent. The young monk who began copying the Psalter 6 months ago with enthusiasm and anxiety has been permanently changed by the experience. Whether that change represents triumph or tragedy remains to be determined by choices still to be made and challenges still to be faced in the demanding and rewarding world of medieval manuscript production. December 1347. 3 months after completing the Royal Psalter, you receive news that transforms your understanding of the work's significance and your own role in medieval scholarship. Brother Augustine calls you to his office to share correspondence that has arrived from various European courts where copies of your manuscript have been received as diplomatic gifts. The reaction has exceeded all expectations, he begins, unfolding letters that bear the seals of foreign nobles and church officials. The Holy Roman Emperor has commissioned his scribes to produce a German translation based on your Latin text. The French court has requested permission to have their illuminators create a companion volume that matches your artistic standards. Most remarkably, the Pope himself has written to commend the accuracy and beauty of the manuscript. The international recognition of your work has implications that extend far beyond personal career advancement. The Psalter has become a symbol of English cultural achievement that enhances the kingdom's diplomatic position throughout Europe. Foreign scholars cite the manuscript as evidence that English monasteries can compete with the finest continental scriptoriums in terms of both technical skill and artistic vision. The scholarly impact becomes apparent when you learn that your transcription is being used as a reference text by theologians who study variations in psalm translations. The accuracy of your copying has made the manuscript valuable, not just as a devotional tool, but as a scholarly resource that preserves specific textual traditions for future academic study. Your work will influence theological scholarship for generations, Brother Augustine explains. The textual choices you preserved reflect centuries of scholarly debate about proper translation and interpretation. Future scholars will cite this manuscript when discussing the development of Latin biblical texts in the 14th century. The artistic influence of Brother Francis's illuminations, based on your textual foundation, has begun to appear in manuscripts produced by other scriptoriums throughout Europe. Foreign illuminators study his techniques and attempt to replicate his innovations, spreading artistic styles that originated in Canterbury throughout the international network of luxury manuscript production. The economic impact of the commission's success has strengthened Canterbury's position in the competitive market for high-end manuscript production. The monastery's reputation for quality has attracted new customers willing to pay premium prices for work that meets royal standards. The increased revenue provides resources for expanding operations, training additional scribes, and investing in better materials and equipment. Your personal transformation from junior scribe to master craftsman has created opportunities that extend beyond manuscript production. Brother Augustine has recommended you for positions that combine scribal work with teaching, administration, and scholarly research. The skills developed through intensive copying have applications throughout the intellectual life of medieval monasticism. I'm assigning you to train the next generation of scribes. He announces, your experience with royal commissions provides knowledge that can't be learned from routine copying work. The apprentices need to understand not just technical skills, but the mental and physical demands of working under extreme pressure. The teaching assignment represents recognition of your expertise, but also acknowledgement that your physical condition may not permit continued intensive copying. The vision problems and hand damage accumulated during the Psalter Commission have made it advisable to reduce the amount of detailed scribal work while transitioning to roles that utilize your knowledge without requiring the same physical demands. Your first apprentice is a young monk named Brother David, whose enthusiasm and anxiety remind you of your own conditions 6 months earlier. Teaching him proper quill preparation, ink mixing, and letterform construction forces you to articulate knowledge that you've internalized through months of intensive practice. The key to consistent letters, you explain as you demonstrate proper pen angle, is developing muscle memory that allows your hand to form shapes automatically while your mind focuses on the text being copied. This only comes through thousands of hours of practice with immediate correction of errors. The process of teaching reveals how much your understanding of scribal work has deepened through the experience of completing a major commission. Technical skills that once required conscious attention have become automatic responses that allow you to focus on high-level concerns like textual accuracy, artistic consistency, and project management. The monastery's growing reputation for manuscript excellence has attracted visiting scholars who come to study techniques and examine completed works. Your Psalter has become a teaching tool that demonstrates best practices in Gothic script, layout design, and quality control. Foreign scribes travel to Canterbury specifically to observe your methods and learn from your experience. The international network of scribal professionals has begun to recognize your name as associated with exceptional quality and reliability. Requests arrive from monasteries throughout Europe seeking your advice on technical problems, quality standards, and project management for complex commissions. Your expertise has become a resource that extends far beyond Canterbury's walls. The long-term health consequences of intensive scribal work have become more apparent as your body adjusts to reduced copying demands. The vision problems that developed during the Salter Commission appeared to be permanent, requiring you to hold text at arm's length for clear reading. The hand damage has stabilized but continues to affect fine motor control required for detailed work. Brother Infirmarius provides realistic assessments of your long-term career prospects based on his observations of other scribes who have completed demanding commissions. Your body has adapted to the demands of your profession, he explains. But those adaptations come at the cost of overall health and longevity. Most master scribes transition to teaching and administrative roles by their 40s to preserve their remaining capabilities. The financial security provided by your success has allowed you to plan for a future that combines scribal work with other scholarly activities. The monastery has provided you with better living quarters, access to the finest materials, and informal privileges that make daily life more comfortable despite physical limitations. Your transformation from ambitious young monk to established master craftsman has been completed. But the path forward involves managing the opportunities and limitations created by that success. The recognition that should provide security has generated expectations and responsibilities that may prove challenging to fulfill given your physical condition. The manuscript that began as a daunting commission has become a masterpiece that enhances your reputation, influences international scholarship, and provides a foundation for future career development. The 6 months of intensive labor that tested every aspect of your character and capability have created opportunities that will shape the rest of your professional life. As winter settles over Canterbury and you begin training the next generation of scribes, you're aware that your contribution to the preservation of human knowledge has achieved a form of permanence that transcends individual mortality. The words you copied will survive for centuries, carrying sacred wisdom to readers you'll never meet and influencing theological scholarship in ways you can't imagine. The young monk who began the royal commission with anxiety and determination has been permanently changed by the experience of creating something perfect in an imperfect world. The knowledge, skills, and recognition gained through that transformation have established a legacy that will continue long after your active scribal career has ended. Spring 1348. As you complete your first year as a master scribe and teacher, devastating news arrives that puts your entire world into a new and terrible perspective. The Great Mortality, what future generations will call the Black Death, has reached the shores of England, spreading from the continent where it has already killed millions of people across Europe. Brother Augustine gathers the scribes to discuss the implications of plague for manuscript production and the preservation of knowledge. His weathered face shows the strain of someone who understands that everything they've worked to build could be destroyed by forces beyond human control. The reports from France and Italy are catastrophic, he begins, his voice heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. Entire monasteries have been abandoned. Libraries have been left to rot as the people who maintain them have died or fled. Centuries of scholarly work are being lost forever. The plague's impact on intellectual life throughout Europe has been immediate and devastating. Monasteries that took centuries to build their collections have been emptied within months. Skilled craftsmen, whose knowledge took decades to develop, have died before they could train replacements. The network of scholars, scribes, and illuminators that maintain medieval learning has been shattered by mortality rates that no institution can survive. Your own work takes on new significance as you realize that the manuscripts being produced at Canterbury may represent some of the only copies of important texts that will survive the coming catastrophe. The royal psalter that seemed like a prestigious commission 12 months ago now appears as a desperate race to preserve sacred knowledge before the plague destroys the civilization that created it. Every manuscript we complete Brother Augustine continues, may be the only copy that survives to reach future generations. We're no longer simply serving current patrons. We're preserving human knowledge for people who may not be born for centuries. The pressure to increase production and ensure the survival of essential texts has led to dramatic changes in the monastery's priorities and working methods. Routine commissions have been set aside in favor of copying the most important religious, historical, and philosophical works in the library. Quality standards remain high, but the emphasis has shifted from artistic excellence to ensuring that crucial knowledge doesn't disappear forever. Your role as teacher has become even more critical as the monastery rushes to train as many scribes as possible before the plague reaches Canterbury. Young monks who might normally spend years learning basic skills are being pushed through accelerated training programs that sacrifice refinement for speed. The luxury of perfectionist standards has been replaced by the urgent need to create enough skilled copyists to preserve essential texts. We may have months or weeks before the plague reaches. U.S. Brother Augustine warns during a meeting with all senior scribes. Every day we delay in copying essential texts is a day that knowledge moves closer to permanent loss. We must work as if civilization itself depends on our productivity. The international perspective provided by correspondence with other monasteries reveals the scope of the disaster overtaking European intellectual life. The University of Paris has suspended operations after losing most of its faculty. The Papal Library at Avignon has been largely abandoned as church officials flee the advancing plague. Scriptoriums throughout France and Germany have been left empty as their inhabitants succumb to disease or flee to rural areas. Your royal psalter, which once seemed like an isolated achievement, now appears as part of a larger effort by English monasteries to preserve and copy essential texts before the plague destroys the institutions that maintain them. Canterbury's reputation for quality has made it a center for refugee scholars who arrive carrying precious manuscripts that may represent the only surviving copies of important works. The physical demands of increased production have created new challenges for managing your health problems while meeting urgent copying deadlines. The vision damage and hand problems accumulated during the Psalter Commission are being aggravated by longer working hours and reduced rest periods. But the knowledge that essential texts may be lost forever makes personal comfort seem trivial. The economic calculations that once governed manuscript production have been overwhelmed by the desperate need to preserve knowledge regardless of cost. Materials that were carefully rationed to maximize profit are now being used as quickly as possible to copy essential works before time runs out. The monastery's treasury is being depleted to purchase parchment, ink, and other supplies needed for emergency copying projects. Your teaching responsibilities have expanded to include not just technical training, but rapid education in the intellectual content of texts being copied. New scribes must understand theological concepts, historical contexts, and scholarly traditions well enough to maintain accuracy while working at unprecedented speed. The luxury of gradual learning has been replaced by intensive education that compresses years of normal development into months of emergency training. The psychological impact of working under plague conditions has affected every aspect of daily life in the monastery. The knowledge that death may arrive at any moment has created a mixture of urgency and fatalism that influences both productivity and mental health. Some monks work with frantic intensity, trying to accomplish as much as possible before they die. Others struggle with depression and despair that makes concentration difficult. We may not live to see the results of our current work. Brother Augustine acknowledges during one of his increasingly frequent addresses to the scribal community that we have the opportunity to ensure that future generations will inherit the intellectual treasures of Christian civilization. Our sacrifice may preserve knowledge that would otherwise disappear forever. The correspondence that once brought news of scholarly developments and artistic innovations now carries reports of death, abandonment, and cultural collapse throughout Europe. Libraries that took centuries to assemble have been scattered by fleeing populations. Manuscripts that survived barbarian invasions and Viking raids are being destroyed by a microscopic enemy that no military force can defeat. Your own manuscript production has been redirected toward creating multiple copies of essential texts that might otherwise be lost. If single copies are destroyed by plague-related disruptions, the variety of works being copied has expanded from religious texts to include historical chronicles, scientific treatises, and philosophical works that preserve secular knowledge alongside sacred wisdom. The master craftsman skills you developed through completing the Royal Psalter have found new purpose in training emergency scribes who must learn complex techniques in a fraction of the normal time. Your experience with working under extreme pressure has become valuable preparation for the ultimate deadline, preserving human knowledge before plague destroys the civilization that created it. As reports of the plague's approach become more specific and urgent, you're faced with the realization that your career as a scribe may be ending not through gradual retirement, but through sudden catastrophe. The skills you've spent years developing, the reputation you've built through successful commissions, and the knowledge you accumulated through intensive study may all become irrelevant if the plague destroys the social structures that support intellectual life. Yet the same skills that allowed you to complete the Royal Psalter under intense pressure have prepared you for this ultimate test of a scribe's dedication to preserving human knowledge. The discipline, accuracy, and endurance developed through months of precision copying have become weapons in humanity's fight against the forces of chaos and destruction that threaten to erase centuries of intellectual achievement. The blank parchment that awaits your quill each morning now represents not just another day's work, but another opportunity to rescue essential knowledge from potential oblivion. Every word you copy may be the one that ensures crucial information survives to guide future generations. Every letter you form may be part of humanity's last hope for preserving the intellectual treasures of medieval civilization. The young monk, who began learning scribal arts as a path to personal advancement, has been transformed by circumstance into a guardian of human knowledge, whose work may determine whether future generations inherit the wisdom of the past or must rebuild civilization. From Fragments and Memories, August 1348. The plague has come and gone, taking with it nearly half the population of England and transforming forever the world you knew as a young scribe. Canterbury Cathedral stands partially empty, its reduced community of survivors working desperately to maintain the traditions and knowledge that have survived humanity's greatest catastrophe. You are among the living, though changed in ways that go far beyond the physical deterioration that has marked your progression from junior scribe to master craftsman. The vision problems and hand damage that once seemed like career-limiting disabilities now appear trivial compared to the simple miracle of survival in a world where skill, wisdom, and virtue provided no protection against microscopic death. The Royal Psalter you completed with such anxiety and effort 2 years ago has taken on new significance as one of the precious few manuscripts that preserve pre-plague scholarship. For a world struggling to rebuild its intellectual foundations, the accuracy you achieved through months of painstaking labor has made your work a reliable source for scholars trying to reconstruct textual traditions that were interrupted by catastrophic mortality. Brother Augustine did not survive the plague, but his legacy lives on in the scribes he trained and the standards he established for manuscript production. The techniques he taught, the quality measures he enforced, and the professional dedication he modeled have become the foundation for Canterbury's efforts to preserve and transmit knowledge to whatever civilization emerges from the chaos. Your role has evolved from craftsman to guardian of human memory. The manuscripts you copy now serve not just the immediate needs of patrons and scholars, but the long-term project of cultural preservation for generations who will inherit a world depleted of teachers, libraries and institutions, every text you preserve represents knowledge that might otherwise disappear forever. The apprentices you train carry forward not just technical skills, but the responsibility for maintaining continuity between the world that was lost and the world that must be rebuilt. Their success or failure will determine whether the intellectual achievements of medieval civilization survive to influence future development or become lost legends of a golden age that cannot be recovered. The physical challenges of scribal work, the eye strain, hand cramps, and postural problems that once dominated your concerns have been placed in perspective by the knowledge that simply being alive to experience those discomforts represents an extraordinary blessing in a world where death arrived suddenly and without regard for human plans or ambitions. The manuscripts that line the shelves of Canterbury's depleted library now constitute an irreplaceable treasure whose value cannot be calculated in economic terms. Each volume represents knowledge that may be unique, wisdom that may be irretrievable, if lost, and human achievement that connects the present to a past that grows more distant and precious with each passing day. Your own transformation from ambitious young monk to master scribe to guardian of civilization has been completed through trials that no training could have prepared you for. The skills developed through months of precision copying have found their ultimate purpose in the desperate work of preserving human knowledge against forces that threaten to erase centuries of intellectual achievement. The royal commission that once seemed like the pinnacle of scribal achievement now appears as preparation for this larger mission. The discipline, accuracy, and endurance required to complete the Psalter under intense pressure have become essential. Tools for working in a world where every day might bring news of another library destroyed, another monastery abandoned, another repository of knowledge lost forever. The networks of scholars, patrons, and craftsmen that once supported luxury manuscript production have been shattered by plague mortality. But the need for accurate copying has never been greater. The survivors work with desperate intensity to preserve essential texts before age, decay, or further catastrophe can claim what the plague spared. Your daily routine now involves not just copying assigned texts, but making difficult decisions about which works deserve priority when time and materials are limited. Should you copy another gospel for a local parish, or preserve a unique historical chronicle that exists in only one fragile manuscript? Should you train another apprentice in basic skills, or focus your energy on creating master copies of texts that may not survive in any other form? The isolation that once troubled you as a side effect of intensive intellectual work has become a valued sanctuary in a world where human contact carries the constant risk of contagion. The scriptorium that felt confining during your early training now seems like a refuge where important work can continue despite the chaos that has overtaken normal social life. The theological texts you copy have taken on new meaning as you witness firsthand the fragility of human civilization and the mysterious ways that divine providence operates through historical catastrophe. The Psalms you transcribed with such care during the Royal Commission now speak directly to your experience of living through humanity's darkest hour. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, has become not just a scriptural passage to be copied accurately, but a personal prayer that sustains you through work that combines intellectual challenge with spiritual significance. The sacred words you preserve will guide future generations through whatever trials await them, just as they have guided you through the trials of your own time. The physical manuscripts you create represent more than collections of text. They are time capsules that carry the wisdom, faith, and knowledge of medieval civilization forward to whatever world emerges from the current darkness. The accuracy of your copying will determine how clearly future generations can hear the voices of the past. The young monk who answered an advertisement for scribal training in happier times could never have imagined that his chosen profession would become humanity's front line in the battle against forgetting. The desire for secure employment and intellectual stimulation has been transformed by circumstance into a sacred calling that combines personal survival with species preservation. As evening approaches and you set down your quill after another day of emergency copying, you're aware that the words you've preserved today may survive long after every physical trace of your existence has disappeared. The manuscripts you create, with cramped hands and failing eyes, will carry medieval learning across the centuries to readers whose names you'll never know and whose world you can't imagine. The scriptorium grows quiet as the surviving monks gather for Compline, the final prayer service of the day. The familiar words of evening prayer take on new meaning when offered by voices that have grown fewer with each passing month. The community that once seemed eternal has been revealed as fragile and temporary, but the knowledge preserved within. These walls may prove more durable than the stones that contain it. Tomorrow will bring another day of copying, another opportunity to rescue essential texts from the forces of chaos and destruction that threaten human memory. The blank parchment that awaits your morning efforts represents both challenge and hope. The chance to preserve one more fragment of civilization's intellectual treasure for whatever future humanity may achieve. The transformation is complete. You began as a young man seeking steady work and ended as a guardian of human knowledge whose labor serves purposes far greater than individual ambition or institutional prestige. The skills learned through months of precise copying have found their ultimate purpose in preserving the accumulated wisdom of centuries for generations who will inherit a world emptied of teachers, but not of teaching. In the scriptorium of Canterbury Cathedral, as plague-devastated England struggles toward an uncertain future, the ancient work continues. Words are copied, knowledge is preserved, and human memory is maintained by the dedicated labor of scribes who understand that their profession has become humanity's defense against the darkness that would erase all trace of civilization's greatest achievements. The quill rests in its stand, the inkpot is sealed for the night, and the completed pages are carefully stored with the hundreds of other manuscripts that represent Canterbury's contribution to humanity's survival. But tomorrow the work will resume, as it has for centuries, and as it must for centuries to come, ensuring that the light of human knowledge continues to shine even in the darkest of times. The medieval scribe's work is never truly finished, for each generation must copy anew the texts that preserve their culture's greatest treasures. Your contribution to this eternal task has been made under circumstances more challenging than any previous generation of scribes could have imagined. But the calling remains the same, to ensure that human wisdom survives the forces that would destroy it. As you make your way to your cell for whatever rest the night may bring, you carry with you the satisfaction of knowing that your life's work has served the highest purposes that any human labor can achieve. You have helped preserve civilization itself, one letter at a time, through the most demanding and rewarding profession that the medieval world could offer. The screaming that once haunted your early days in the scriptorium has been replaced by a deeper understanding of what it truly means to serve both God and humanity through the precise, patient, essential work of preserving human knowledge for future generations. This is why being a medieval scribe was harder than you ever imagined, and more important than you ever dreamed.